Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to my first film review on this channel, and today I'm talking about The Batman. The Batman earns 4 stars out of 5. I don't think there is a more versatile superhero than Batman. I mean, this guy dons genres like he dons capes. We've seen him in 60s pop, we've seen him in gothic expressionism, we've seen him in kind of campy kind of movies, we've seen him in Lego animated comedies, we've seen him in the dark, gritty, realistic world, just the typical superhero polish, as well as the kind of modern neo-noir kind of film. And so The Batman delivers on a promise of being a detective film centered around personal stakes. Director Matt Reeves does a great job of bringing his vision to life, along with the help of cinematographer Greg Fraser and this awesome cast that's in this movie. And so, before we move on, spoilers ahead. So knowing I was going to review The Batman, I decided that I would make my room a little gothic-like, Gotham City-like. I got the yellow light in the back, and it's kind of moody in here, so I figure a good place to start then is talking about the aesthetics of the film. Now, it was evident from the trailers that this movie gleaned a lot from the films of David Fincher, especially Seven and Zodiac. I know people have talked about the color palette and have talked about just the general story beats and things like that have influenced the Batman that are taken from Zodiac or Seven, but I think it's really cool that in this film, there are a lot of close-ups of the letters addressed to Batman. There's close-ups of the clues and the murder weapons and things like that. And we see that a lot in David Fincher movies. When you watch a Fincher movie, you see a lot of insert shots of things that are important to the story that the characters are interacting with, whether that's the letters from the Zodiac Killer or the different kinds of tools used to murder from John Doe in movie 7. And even in other films of Fincher, you just see these lingering shots on different objects and different things that communicate the story and help the audience dive deeper into the details of the scene. And so the Batman takes that and utilizes that as well. I think it's really cool that you just look at a shot and you're like, oh, that's pretty close to what Fincher does. It's more than on a macro level. It's also on kind of a micro level as well with shots like that. The production design is really cool in here. I think it's really interesting how it's both modern and retro. We see in the kind of Times Square area that there's tons of LED billboards and they're just stacked on top of each other. It's really clustered and really claustrophobic with the skyline taken up with these LED billboards. But on the ground we see like classic taxis going by, we see classic kind of diners and even some gothic architecture because it's blending cities together. It's blending New York, London, Chicago. All those cities are kind of in this amalgam that converge to make Gotham into something that's really unique that we haven't really seen before on screen. In Tim Burton's, we saw a very gothic and very German expressionistic kind of set design. In Batman Begins, we get a little bit of that. In The Dark Knight, we get this really real-world style. It just basically looks like Chicago. And so the Batman really fuses cities together and creates a production design that makes a world look very unique and very its own. One foot in the present and one foot in the past, and it's really visually satisfying. It's just visual candy. What also plays a part of the look is the lens choices that Greg Fraser chose. Him and Matt Reeves decided on going with anamorphic lenses, and they chose ones that were specifically kind of older and had a lot of flaws in the image. And so you see in the bokeh that they're really not either circular or what's typical for anamorphic lenses of being more oval, but they're even stretched a little bit more than that. And you can see this really clearly in the shot of the Riddler putting the device around the DA's neck in his car, and this whole shot is out of focus. So it's really interesting to see the lights and the shadows kind of just mesh in the background, and it's really hard to make out what you see, but you just know it's unnerving because it's so foreign to how we actually see things. Outside of the aesthetic, I think the characters are done really well. I like the dynamic of Bruce. Bruce is more concerned about being Batman and the mission of being Batman, and it makes sense if Reeves is putting the focus on his first 2 years of being Batman. It makes more sense to have him be just fully obsessed with perfecting this persona and perfecting his approach to this mission, and to the point where this obsession is just taking over, and Bruce doesn't really care about his public image as Bruce Wayne, but he cares more about doing good or trying to do good as Batman. And so I think that dynamic really works. I like the fact that we get way more Batman than Bruce. I mean, the film's titled Batman, so I'm here for it. In terms of live action films, I think this is probably the best Catwoman that we've gotten so far. I think they do the character a lot of justice by treating her as more than just a damsel in distress, but she's kind of the femme fatale, and it really plays well into Batman relying on her as a tool to get information out of and building that relationship. So I think there's a lot of cool dynamic there. I don't think the relationship is incredibly spicy between Batman and Catwoman. The romance is pretty flat because of how Batman is done in this. But I like their dynamic still. I think it's cool and it's growing. Riddler is done very well. I think it's really modernized for this day and age, taking elements from Jigsaw, from Saw movies, taking elements from Zodiac and pulling in serial killer kind of themes instead of just this kind of weird trickster, puzzler, thief guy. He's a man on a mission. Paul Dano does a great job of embodying this new iteration of the character, making it creepy and unnerving, and really good work for performances. At times, especially in the jail cell, he kind of reaches that over-the-top point that's just like, it's could have been brought down about 2 notches, I feel like. But what I would have liked to see a little bit more from this character is his pride and his hubris and his desire to be the smartest guy in the room. We get that a lot in like the Arkham video games, and I do feel like the character of the Riddler in this movie lends a lot from the Arkham video games, just like I feel like the aesthetic probably does too in a way. But I do wish that this character had a little bit more pride in him, that he was really just completely arrogant, and we get one small moment of that in the jail cell where he's taunting Batman and saying like, "Oh well, you're just not as smart as I thought you were. I think I gave you too much credit." I would have liked to seen more of that spread out across the film, maybe in the letters that he wrote him. But obviously, this character is like kind of a fan of Batman. He's saying that they're doing it together, that they're a part of this together, that they're involved. So it makes sense that he would still have a certain level of respect for Batman at this stage. So maybe we'll see more of his hubris in other movies if they continue this character. Alfred has some really cool moments. I like it best when he's not just an exposition dump, but when he's really like actually involved into the relationship between him and Bruce, and they have these moments of talking about legacy and more thematic elements more than expositional moments. I think that's when the character thrives. I think it's also really cool that they snuck in there that Alfred trained Bruce to fight. I think that is really unique to this story and gives more weight to Alfred's background and his history, and how in some comic books he's been a spy, and this kind of takes inspiration from a comic book called Batman Earth 1. I haven't read that book. I want to now, so I'm looking forward to diving into that. But I really like that Alfred is the one who trained Bruce, and it kind of lends to there's a computer animated show called Beware the Batman that's on HBO Max. That's really unique and different, and they lean into that of Alfred being this not only butler but kind of mentor of not just character but also fighting skills and things like that. like that. So it's pretty cool to see that in the film. Of course, Colin Farrell does a great job in Penguin. They really make this character fun, and he's having fun as this character. I really don't think I could say anything new that hasn't been said already about Colin Farrell in this role. I'm excited to see him in more stuff, and excited to see this character evolve into something else. I do think, though, that they had a missed opportunity when they're in the rain, about to go into the car chase scene. I mean, they're in the rain. He should have an umbrella. Easy fruit, guys. Easy, low-hanging fruit. Alright, just give me that little nibble of umbrella action, and it would have been good. But, you know, he still does a great job with the character. I'm going to include this here. The Batmobile has the best introduction in the movie. And probably the best introduction in all of Batman media out there. When the Batmobile arrives, it is so intimidating and so frightful and just so cool and awesome that it's one of my favorite scenes in the movie. Not even just the car chase, but him just revving up the car and it's spewing out sparks and fire and the engine is thrusting and it's awesome. One of the best scenes in the movie. In terms of the story, I think it's really cool that Matt Reeves dug deep into the detective aspect, especially with Batman's roots in that, coming out of, you know, literally Detective Comics, as the title was. And I really like how Matt Reeves pulled from some of the best Batman comics, and really some of the best comics made, and had really great inspiration for the story. Those being Year One, The Long Halloween, Batman Ego, and also Batman Earth One. I haven't read Earth One yet, but I would like to. Sounds really cool from what I've heard about it. We're kind of seeing a resurgence of detective-type mystery movies with films like Knives Out, Murder on the Orient Express, or Murder on the Nile. So it's kind of a good time, smart business move to take the character in this direction, while also making the story fresh for the superhero genre to be more engaging with other genres, so that superhero films can be reaching beyond their own, just like Logan did before it, or the Joker. One of my favorite scenes in this film is the opening where we are touring Gotham while Bruce gives his monologue. I think that scene is so cool that you get to dive deep into the criminal element, that Bruce is talking about living in the shadows and being in the shadows and how that strikes fear into the criminal element in Gotham. I think it's such a cool and unique scene, and honestly, it would make a great short film. I'm really jealous that I haven't made something like that, and I might take that as inspirations and try to do something like that. But I think that's a really good template for making a short film. And I know there's the whole like show don't tell, avoid narration kind of thing. If you narrate it, you're a bad filmmaker. It's like, dude, whatever. Just make whatever's cool. And that scene was cool, and so I dig it. So although I feel like the detective aspect of the film is done really well, and I feel like the structure of the film works, I mean, it's long, but I feel like the message is a little muddy. So throughout the film, we're following Batman, and we are, rooting for this vigilante, and we're rooting for his war on crime. But we're also seeing the parallels between him and the Riddler. We're seeing them both doing surveillance through binoculars. We see them both wearing the mask, and also both trying to achieve justice in a way, but one does it through just focused violence, and one does it through being a serial killer and basically a terrorist. And so we see the parallels between them, but we're rooting for one and not the other. And at the end of the film, when Batman confronts the Riddler's followers, they ask one of them to identify himself, and he says, "I am vengeance," just like Batman has done throughout the whole movie. And so it's here that I feel like the message is a little confused, where when I first watched it, I felt like they were trying to take the approach that the Watchmen TV show did, that they're basically saying, hey, anyone who anyone who wears a mask is not someone to be trusted, and they're not looking out for your best interest. So vigilantism is really a bad and hurtful, harmful thing. And superheroes in that sense are kind of not great examples of being heroic. So that was my first impression. And then watching it the second time, Bruce takes that in, and he takes it as, he can't be vengeance, he has to be hope. So I think the film really wants to comment on the harmful aspects of vigilantism, especially when we've had, moments in society recently where we've had certain types of misguided vigilantes. We have example of the Capitol attack. Being a Michigander, I think of the plot to try to kidnap Whitmer. These fringe groups exist, and so I really don't have a problem with the film showing the harmful reality that we live in, that fringe groups do exist, and that the internet can perpetuate toxic thoughts and toxic behavior to not only be just words on a screen, but also turn into actions. So I really don't have a problem with that, and using that as an example. And actually, I think it's a very good way in this story for the Riddler to get henchmen or followers. Because I always wondered, how does a dweeb like the Riddler get henchmen? But this movie does it very well. Again, I think the film wants to comment on vigilantism and wants to comment on the harmful effects of trying to be a vigilante, but it knows it can't do that with Batman. Like, it so desperately wants to make that commentary, but they kind of just like, okay, well, we can't really say that being a vigilante is bad because, we are trying to make 2 other movies after this, so we have to just make it as an internal mission, an internal thought in Bruce that, okay, well, I can't be vengeance, so I have to be hope. But it's really, through watching the parallels between the two of them, between hearing the Riddler's monologue in the jail cell, the criminal, the fringe guy saying I'm vengeance, it really does communicate more that, taking the law into your own hands isn't a good thing. And so, but yet we're still supposed to root for Batman. And so I have no problem with somebody making that argument, even though I like superheroes a lot. I like my heroes altruistic. But if that's how you feel about superheroes, then maybe you shouldn't be making a superhero movie. Especially Batman, when he is, a character that is meant to be incorruptible. I think this also plays a part with the, tarnishing of Thomas Wayne's character. This has been a trend throughout recent years. Like, we saw that in the Telltale video game of Batman, and we saw that with the Joker. We see it now, and I appreciate what they're trying to do to make the story personal for Batman, and it works. It certainly works. But I think I'm glad that they didn't go through with it all the way. I'm glad that they didn't really tarnish him beyond just making a mistake of trusting a criminal, and really developing that better so that his legacy is not really tarnished. Because I feel like that really just cheapens Batman, and obviously it's meant to rock Bruce's character and put him on edge and make him have this internal debate. But so yeah, those are just some of my thoughts around the movie. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was really cool. I'm looking forward to owning it and watching some of the special features on it. And I'm excited for, hopefully, sequels and this world growing. So Matt Reeves really knocked it out of the park. I'm looking forward to more. So I'd love to know what you guys think. And you can either tweet me those thoughts or comment them down below. If I have commenting activated, I forget. But anyways, hope you enjoyed this review, and I'll see you next time.